Welcome, everyone, to the Q&A session for our upcoming course, Becoming the Messenger You're Meant to Be, the 9-week journey to break through your fears and embrace your calling. I'm Lisa Bonise, and I'm really jazzed about hosting this Q&A conversation for the Shift Network, where we'll explore the teachings of Tim Kelley and address questions about his upcoming 9-week course, Becoming the Messenger You're Meant to Be, which begins Thursday, July 11th. A little later, I'll explain how you can participate in this course, even if you can't attend the live sessions. But first, I want to introduce our guest. Tim Kelley is a global change agent and internationally renowned expert on higher purpose. He works with top leaders in many fields and countries to transform human institutions and evolve society to its new form. Tim's methodology, True Purpose, has been featured internationally in magazines, newspapers, and on television. Tim has trained over 1,000 consultants, therapists, and coaches in his methods and taught voice dialogue on 3 continents. He's the author of True Purpose and the best-selling co-author of 3 other books. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open up for your questions. But first, I want to welcome Tim, who's going to begin our conversation by leading us in an opening meditation and then telling us a little bit about his upcoming course. Welcome, Tim. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks so much. Delighted to be here. So should we dive right into the meditation here?
Go for it.
Okay. So I was thinking about this. Normally we do just sort of a grounding type thing, but I have something slightly different in mind today. So we'll try this. And by the way, we do this in all our programs. We like to have a little centering something, a poem or a reflection, or even just a few moments breathing before the course begins, so that we can get in the right state to learn and grow and evolve. So if you're not driving or operating heavy machinery, go ahead and close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. In this case, I wanted to lead a guided visualization. So as you're breathing and relaxing, imagine yourself on a stage. If you're a messenger, you've probably had this imagination before. This won't be new. And imagine thousands of faces peering up at you. All ages, all sizes and colors, different parts of the world, all come to hear you speak. Now, you haven't said anything yet, but I just want you to notice their faces and how eager they are to hear what you have to say. They have come to hear you, and they want to hear your message. Keep breathing. Just that image may have caused you to stop breathing. Keep breathing. And just notice what that image brings up in you. Here's the heart of the meditation. What are you feeling and what are you thinking as you see all these faces looking up at you, waiting to hear what you have to say? Could be some fear, certainly. Could also be some eagerness. Could also be rubbing your ego the right way in some way. Oh my God, all the attention's on me. That's so great. Just with as little judgment as you can, notice the various different reactions, the various different feelings, body sensations, and thoughts you're having as you see all these people waiting to hear what you have to say. Could be, oh no, or finally. Another deep breath. Letting go of the image and just being with yourself, with your body. Great. And depending on what that brought up for you, that may inspire a question at some point during the call. We'll see what happens with that.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Tim. It certainly brought up some fun stuff for me. But we have the rest of our time together to dive into our viewers' questions for Tim as we prepare for his upcoming course. Again, that's called Becoming the Messenger You're Meant to Be, and it begins Thursday, July 11th. And if you want to check out the website and learn more about the 9-week course, you can visit becomingamessenger.com to see the full description and to register. So let's go ahead and get started with some questions. If you have a question for Tim, go ahead and type it in. I'll be happy to read it out loud. In the meantime, we've got some questions already waiting for us. People are really resonating with this topic. So let's just go ahead and dive in with a question here from April, who says, I feel I have so many directions I can take as a messenger, and I do listen, but what else can I do?
I'm sorry, I do what? I missed one word in there.
She's implying that she's listening to the directions that she's been given.
Oh, okay.
She has all kinds of directions she can take, but she doesn't know how to narrow down the focus.
Yeah, so let me say that this gets into kind of a strategy issue, which is assuming that you're clear about your message and assuming you're clear who that message is for, which is not true for most messengers, but assuming those two things are true, there's still the question of how do I transmit my message to my audience? And part of the problem with that is each year, new channels of communication open up. It's gotten crazy how many different ways you can communicate stuff. So I'm going to give kind of a long answer and a short answer. I'll give you the longer answer first. The longer answer is that there are, depending on who the audience is, they're going to be more available to be reached by different media. Also, your personal inclinations matter, meaning that you may be more geared towards writing than speaking, or speaking than writing. Maybe you're a social media maven. I am not, right? So social media is like, I really have to force myself to even go look at it. So social media is not a really good candidate for me. I've tried it, and it's just way too much effort. I'm too old. But speaking works great for me. Some people are terrified of speaking. I feel very comfortable in front of an audience. I love speaking. I love presenting. So speaking gigs work better for me personally, right? So there's the ways the audience receives information. There's your preferred ways of distributing information. And then there's other things that have to do with features of the communications medium that you're using. So for example, if you're trying to enroll people in a program, say, and that you're not just giving your message, but you also want people to sign up for something, well, it turns out that public speaking or email have much higher rates of people actually choosing to spend money on something than, say, social media does. So there are also features of the different media that matter. They're better or worse at communicating certain things or producing certain outcomes. So all of that leads to sort of a mix and match strategy process of saying, okay, which ones am I better at? Which ones are my audience more available to? What am I trying to do here, and which media lend themselves to that? And it doesn't make sense to try to communicate over 20 or 30 media. It's too confusing and too distracting for you. So you have to pick a few key ones that you're going to focus on. Given all of that, let me just say the short answer is that you could go to your higher guidance and get some advice. Which media would work best for me? And that's a really, really good way of choosing a strategy, is to get guidance from something that knows better than you how your message is supposed to be transmitted out there. Now, you may or may not want to follow that advice based on all the previous strategy stuff we talked about. So if my higher guidance, my trusted source, says to me, oh, you should only communicate via social media, nothing else, I'm going to be like, whoop, time out. But that very rarely happens. Usually the answers make good sense. So long answer, get that whole strategy thing. Short answer, ask your higher guidance, your trusted source. And we can explain that more if people don't know what I mean by that. You can ask a question about that. It's actually very integral to how we'll do this process in the program. But focus on a few. Don't get yourself distracted, and pay attention. There are people out there who will say, oh, you have to be on social media. Everyone's doing social media. Take my course about how to communicate via social media. And someone else will have a course saying, oh, email is still really the best way to do this. You have to communicate via email. Here's all the reasons why email is the right way to do it. Take my course about how to do email marketing. Or here's, public speaking is definitely the best way to communicate with the audience. Take my course on public speaking. All these people have a dog in the hunt, as they say, right? They have a vested interest in you using their medium because that's what their class is about. That doesn't mean it's the best one for you. So when people are telling you, oh, the only way to communicate is this way, take it with a grain of salt, because they probably have a reason for saying that. They may have good evidence for it, but they probably have a reason for saying that. I think that's good, Lisa. Let's leave it there.
All right, solid advice. Thank you for that. Let's go to here's a very basic question from Louisa, who just wants to know, how do you know you're meant to be a messenger?
hmm So again, longer answer, shorter answer. The longer answer is there are certain key features to messengers, certain criteria that you can kind of check off. One is that messengers tend to be consistently drawn to one-to-many communication opportunities, systems, media, stuff like that. So, for example, messengers often get involved in speaking, in writing, in teaching, in leading. And it could be teaching like kindergarten, or it could be teaching CEOs how to run their company, right? It could be anything, but any one-to-many thing. There are some people who are really drawn to one-to-one communications. Like they don't like facilitating meetings. They don't like doing consulting because they have to deal with too many people at a time. They prefer to do coaching so they can be dealing one-on-one, because that's really their preferred style, is that one-on-one thing. Now, many messengers do one-on-one stuff. I do one-on-one stuff too. But messengers have a definite proclivity, a bias, a tendency towards one-to-many formats, with you being the one or very close to the one. Right? You might be supporting speakers or doing the media for other people to write through or something like that. Usually involved in that in some way. Could be involved in TV or radio or who knows what. So that's one thing. The other is that messengers, the other key one is that messengers often know they're messengers, but don't know how they know. And so if I just look you in the eye and say, are you a messenger? If you're a messenger, probably somewhere in the back of the mind, you hear a little, yep, yes. Yeah. Even if that's not you saying it, like you might be saying, no, I'm not a messenger. I don't want to be a messenger. But when I say, are you a messenger? You can hear the little yes happening in the back of your head, right? So there's just kind of this built-in awareness. That seems to be the key, right? That's the longer answer. The shortest answer is if you ask your higher guidance, it will tell you very directly, yes, you're a messenger. No, you're not, right? Now, you may not have the communication channel open enough to do that. We'll handle that during the program. But if your communication channel is open, you can just say, am I a messenger? And you'll get a yes or no back. If you don't get an answer at all, it's because you've got too much fear wrapped up in the issue, and that will interfere with the process of you hearing the answer. So you say, am I a messenger, higher guidance? And you hear like static. That means that you have fears about being a messenger that are interfering with the process of hearing the answer from your higher guidance. Now, if you've got a lot of fear about being a messenger, you're probably a messenger. People who aren't messengers don't have a lot of fear about it. Right? They're not all wound up about it. They don't spend time thinking about, am I a messenger or not? They're going on about their daily lives. They don't feel that burden of responsibility, right? Often it feels like a burden, this burden of responsibility to communicate something to the masses. They don't have that going on. So it doesn't worry them. They're not afraid of it because it's just not relevant for them.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered that you're a messenger because you're afraid of it. That's a
Right.
good sign. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to a question here from Morgan, who knows he or she, it's an androgynous name, is a messenger. Morgan says, I'm a published novelist and have always known that this is how I am a messenger, teaching through storytelling. Problem is, there are stories wanting to burst out of my head onto the page, but I can't make myself sit down and release them. It's not writer's block. The stories are there, waiting to be birthed. But if I could name the problem, I might be able to solve it. Can you help me with this?
Good. So this gets into a very common issue for messengers, which is internal blocks. So it's quite rare that someone knows she's a messenger, knows her message, knows who the audience is, and doesn't feel any resistance to going out and spreading the message. It happens, but it's pretty rare. It's usually the result of a lot of work, if that's the case. So Morgan, in your case, there's likely a fear, a limiting belief, or a part in the way. And by a part, I mean a voice, one of the voices in your head, like the inner critic that says, "Oh no, you're worthless," or whatever, or a fear-based voice that says, "Oh no, you can't do that." So, I mean, if you listen in your mind when you're making decisions, you can hear a debate going on. Those are the different voices having an argument. So these voices, which some of them will be in favor of spreading your message, and some of them will be against it, and that's what creates the internal tension that most messengers feel. So Morgan, if you're sitting down, if you know, oh, I know what I should write about next, it's this, right? And you know how to write. You know how to write because you've done it before, and yet you can't quite get yourself to do it. Likely there's a fear in the way. Usually a fear. Could be a limiting belief or something like that, but usually a fear. And the fear could be conscious and it could be unconscious. Me saying, "Oh, you have a fear," you might be right now going, "Oh yeah, I know what it is." Or maybe you have no idea and you still can't get yourself to do it, which is pretty common. That means you have an unconscious fear. So a big part of being a messenger, being a successful messenger, is learning how to deal with fear, learning how to make fears conscious, how to clear them, how to deal with the parts that are having the fears, to get the fears out of the way. Because if you don't know what your message is, it's because you're afraid of finding out. If you don't know who your message is for, it's because you're afraid of finding out. If you know what your message is and you know who it's for and you're not spreading it, it's because you're afraid of what will happen if you do. So learning how to deal with fear is a key skill for a messenger. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck most of the time. So probably what happened, Morgan, is you have what we call permission to write on certain topics and don't have permission to write on others. And until you know what that fear is, it's going to be difficult to do anything about getting permission, right? Even knowing what the fear is may not be enough. Simply knowing what the fear is doesn't remove the block. So there are various different tools and exercises, and you may have learned some in other programs like Byron Katie's The Work or Emotional Freedom Technique or who knows what. There are lots of different ways of clearing blocks, and there are some that we use in this program. There are 2 or 3 specifically that we're going to use in this program to help you get the blocks out of the way so you can, and Morgan, you're ahead of the game because you already know what you're supposed to be writing about, right? And you've already done it. But many others aren't that progressed because they don't have permission yet to even know what their message is. But permission issues are a big part of it, and that's what it sounds like is going on for you.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. And you're talking about fear. I think that's a good time to bring up this next question. This is from Desiree, and I'm fascinated by this as well. You were talking with Stephen Dinan during the previous conversation. Desiree says, would you please speak more about the common fear that you've found in your clients of being burned at the stake or other extreme repercussions for delivering their message? I resonate with this. What can we do about this?
This is another one. I debated bringing this up during the part about how to tell you're a messenger. This is actually a very odd way of telling if you're a messenger. Is if you imagine, right, and this may have happened even at the beginning of the call when I told you to picture all these faces looking up at you, that might have been quickly followed by an image of some violent death, right? And it's sort of some fears of persecution for spreading the message. And so the most common ones are being crucified or burned at the stake. Those seem to be more common. And for some reason, I have no idea why. It's usually men for crucified and women for burned at the stake. That's not a very scientific survey, but it seems to lean in that direction. Stoned to death, beheaded, hung, less frequently, but still relatively common. And what I find interesting about that is how common it is. How many messengers have had fear fantasies of one of those scenarios, usually repeatedly. Now, why is that? Excellent question. I don't know. But let me offer you some theories. Let me say I have some ideas, but I don't want to say conclusively, this is why it's true for all people. That would be very arrogant of me. Some people say, oh, well, I investigated that and I found in a past life I was burned at the stake, right? So it's a recurring lifetimes kind of thing. Now, you personally may or may not believe in past lives. Doesn't matter to me, right? But if you do, That's a plausible explanation. It happened. Maybe it happened more than once, and now you've got it lodged in your mind, like, oh, got to make sure that doesn't happen again. The other explanation that doesn't depend on past lives is just the awareness that that has in fact happened in the past, right? If you read the Bible, for example, there's plenty of examples of people being killed for spreading their message. And we don't have to go that far that back, right? Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, you don't have to look far to find people that the Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i religion, back in the, I guess it was the 1850s, the prophet who foretold his coming was killed before he showed up, right? So it's not uncommon, right? The more rare case is the messenger who survives to old age, like Allah or like Buddha or Muhammad, who dies an old person in their bed. So so even without the past lives things, there would be, a reasonable degree of sort of built-in cultural fear about this stuff. None of that's the issue. The issue is that's another fear that keeps people from being a messenger. If you have that picture in your mind, it's going to create a disincentive for getting clear about your message and getting it out there, whether you consider that fear to be a rational one or not. It's irrelevant whether it's a rational fear or not. You still have to clear it, just like any other fear. Just like a fear of getting a bad review on your novel or something like that. This fear is just as able to stop you as that one, whether it's rational or not. So again, we're back to clearing fears. So I don't think the exact why of it matters that much. I think what matters more is these fears are going on, messengers have them, and they get in the way, and you have to get them out of the way. I think that's the key. And let me just say briefly, Lisa, that when I was working on the book True Purpose, which is, thus far been my opus, it took probably 2 years longer than it needed to, because I had a fear of being persecuted by evangelical Christians for putting out a message that could be interpreted, and rightly so, in some ways as talking to God. If you believe in God, the book could be used that way. And feeling like, oh my God, they're gonna be all upset at me, and none of that happened at all. In fact, we have evangelical Christians who've been trained to use the True Purpose process with their clients. And I realized afterwards, it's like, oh, they have much bigger things to worry about in terms of negative cultural influences than my little book. So, but the fear, right? The fear really slowed me down. So this is the thing I want to help messengers with, is to get the fear out of the way so that it doesn't prevent you from doing what you're here to do.
Okay, thanks. Again, I can relate to that one, so I get it, and thank you for addressing that. We've got another writer here, and I apologize in advance for possibly butchering the name. Velika, not sure how to pronounce this.
Velika.
But the question is,
Hi, Velika.
I'm worried about writing. Do you? Okay, great. The question is, I'm worried about writing a story about a serial killer that might inspire would-be or could-be serial killers from feeling my story is giving them permission. Can you advise me?
Yeah, great fear, right? And there's another one that's right squarely in the way. Now, I find it highly unlikely that someone who is not a serial killer would read a book about a serial killer and then go out and start killing people and say, wow, that book really inspired me. If someone is a serial killer, they're going to get inspiration from wherever they're going to get their inspiration from, your book or otherwise. Again, the issue is the fear and what you need to do to get the fear out of your way so that you can create this piece of message material. Now, how you get the fear out of the way may influence how you create the message. But if you're operating with the fear in place, it'll do one of two things. One, it'll prevent you from doing it at all. Excuse me. Or two, it'll cause you to water it down to such a degree because of the fear that it will not have the impact it's meant to have. Right? If you're going to write about a serial killer, it should be powerful, impactful stuff that really kind of, grabs the reader. And that's going to bring up that fear. So back to clearing the fear.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Let's see. Let's go to this is an anonymous question, and it's how does the message change for family, clients, colleagues, marketing, sales? Does it
Yep.
change?
It does. It really does. And this is something we're going to deal with later in the program after people are more clear on their message, which is the message itself can usually be summed up in a paragraph, like the core of the message. And it might be something like, we're destroying the planet, and if we want to continue to live here, we have to change our ways. That would be an example of someone's message summed up in a single sentence, right? Or the time to create heaven on earth is now. We have everything we need. Let's get started. That would be another example of a message boiled down to its most essential elements. So in the program, we're going to be finding that. We're going to be finding the core of your message. It's actually relatively rare for you to articulate the message in its core raw form. Usually it's being adapted to a particular audience, a particular medium, a particular length, and also to a particular desired outcome. Often, like marketing and sales being a good example, it's not just about getting the message out there. It's about getting the message out there and then causing something to happen, like them clicking on a link or signing up for a program or hiring you as a coach or something like that. Likewise, in activism, right? It's not just about getting the message out there. It's about getting the message out there and getting people to come to a rally, or getting people to vote, or getting people to vote for you, or to run for office themselves, or something like that, right? Or to get some legislative body to pass a piece of legislation or a piece of policy or something like that. So often there's a desired outcome, and the message has to be adapted with that desired outcome in mind. So the message is usually part of a larger strategy, much of the time, not always, but much of the time. So that's something we're going to talk about towards the end of the program, because that's a whole skill and a set of techniques to be able to say, okay, here's the raw message, here's the audience, here's the medium, here's the desired outcome. How do I adapt this to do all of that? And that's beyond the scope of what we can do in a call right now. But I was just actually recently I was looking at we've got coaches applying to coach this program, right? So we have coach support in this program, and so they have to have certain skills in order to be able to coach the program. And so we've got lots and lots and lots of coaches who are trained in all the methods that we're using. But in the case of this program, they also have to have published their own message out to the world in some way. Otherwise, they're not ready to guide and support you. So I was asking them for samples of times when they've done this, and it was great. There were two of them where they had, they just gave me the link to their website and told me what their message was, went to the website, and I'm like, oh, there it is. There's the message. I can see it woven all through this content, all guiding someone towards wanting to hire them, but it's absolutely the message being used for that purpose. So kind of the answer to the question, how do I do that, is a longer answer than I can give right now. I will say, as with many things, I'll say there's a shorter and longer version of that. The shorter version of that is you can get help from your higher guidance adapting the message to a particular situation, which I do on a regular basis. So when I go to give a public talk, first thing I do is I find out what the people who are, assuming that I know the talk is purposeful, I find out what they're looking for so I can see how to adapt my message to, say, the conference theme, for example. Then I talk to my higher guidance and to the staff and kind of work out the details so that we can come up with marketing language they'll use to put on the conference agenda or something to market the talk to the people who will be coming. Then the day before the talk or the morning of the talk, I go back and talk to my higher guidance again and see, now finally, how do I adapt this talk to this audience, right? And this space and this event and this theme and everything now in not quite, but almost real time. And potentially revise the talk. I've actually rewritten talks the night before because of the guidance I got before I went on stage. And sometimes pivoted in the middle of a talk because I got higher guidance while I was speaking. So that's the other trick here, is don't do the work yourself, get your higher guidance to do it for you.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're here with Tim Kelley, learning about his upcoming course, Becoming the Messenger You're Meant to Be, which begins Thursday, July 11th. And you can log on to becomingamessenger.com for all the details and to register. Let's go ahead and get back into questions. Tim, you've really tapped into something here because there's so many questions about people fearing the outcome. They seem to know what they're doing, but what happens if? Here's a question from Helen who says, I'm afraid of being wrong with my delivery of the message I receive. What if I've misinterpreted the message and lead people down the wrong path?
I love it. Another great fear, right? And it's a lot of these questions, Lisa, are going to come back to this, excuse me, to the same thing, which is you need a clear methodology for clearing these fears out of the way. But ignoring them is not a methodology for two reasons. One, it doesn't work. You can't just tell a fear to go away. And the other thing is the things that you fear, we don't want those to happen. It would be a bad thing if you were stoned to death. It would be a bad thing if you led your flock astray by giving the message incorrectly. That stuff's important, right? We want to make sure it doesn't happen. So the methodology we use in the program not only clears the fear, it also makes it so that the fear can't come true. That's the key. Your psyche relaxes when it says, oh, I see, that's not going to happen. Okay, now you can go ahead, now you can proceed, right? So part of the answer here is you have to be committed to delivering the message correctly. And if you're not sure you've interpreted it correctly, you have to find a way to confirm that. And again, I'm going to lead back to the higher guidance, like to say, okay, higher guidance, I think the message is this. I think the interpretation is this. And did I get that right? A key with this, kind of a canary in a coal mine, a signal that you're off, is if the way you've interpreted the message and the way you're delivering the message is making someone wrong, right? So you're saying, aha, it's their fault. They're the bad people. They're the ones we should be acting against. That's almost never the real core, pure message. Almost never. So if you've got that feature in it, right, that say, okay, we have to change the world this way, but we have to do it because of these other bad people, then you've probably misinterpreted the message, at least the way your higher guidance would put it. So that's a clue, but that's not going to cover all misinterpretations. That's a very narrow thing. So check with your higher guidance, and then there's this fear processing that needs to happen in order to make it so the fear can't come true, and clear the fear so it's not blocking you.
Okay, interesting. Very good. This next question, it's a little long, so give me a second here to read it out. This is Glow, who says, my topic makes people extremely uncomfortable. It's about the effects of rejection after adoption, followed by the journey of healing for survivors of clergy abuse. So it's pretty complex. The question goes on. I became an advocate for survivors to push for preventative education, and I was passionate about it. We met huge resistance, and after 7 years, I burned out and walked away. But then I started my own healing journey, found my soul through some incredibly dark nights and miraculous and synchronistic events. I'm writing my story, but feel incredibly anxious at times about putting myself back out there. I work hard to overcome these fears. What would you say to me about sharing my message?
Yeah, so it would have to happen in a different way and with a different outcome. Otherwise, it's absolutely not worth doing, right? You already beat your head against the wall. You already tried to push the rock uphill, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. No need to do it again. So this is going to lead to a strategy that requires that not to be the outcome. And so that means that you have to design an approach where those things aren't going to come true. Or if they do come true, they're going to come true only briefly, because either you're going to fix it or you're going to stop, one or the other. Now, likely the situation has changed. Now, what I'm saying isn't going to necessarily make the fear go away, but I think it's hopeful. Likely the situation has changed. So without the healing journey having occurred, going out and delivering the message would probably be done in an accusatory and punitive way. Now, I don't know that that's true. That's just what typically happens, right? So if you've been a victim, and you're trying to spread this message to help other victims, but you haven't really worked through your pain and your wounds thoroughly enough, then you're going to go out there in a blaming kind of way, which absolutely generates resistance. So this is kind of referring back to the thing I said before, right? That's almost never the pure version of the message. So it requires kind of internal healing and forgiveness and dealing with wounds and transformation in order to be able to go out and give a message about abuse without attacking or blaming anyone. That's a high standard, right? That's a difficult, high degree of difficulty exercise. And if you do it successfully, then there won't be any resistance. There's no need for people to resist you if you're delivering the message that way. I'm reminded of this, and we'll talk about this at the very end of the program, some of the key mistakes messengers make. This is one of them. And I don't know if you guys know 1 Billion Rising. It's ending violence against women. I went to a rally with my wife. She leads flash dances for this movement periodically. And we went to San Francisco City Hall, which I live in Berkeley, so it's not that far away. And we're listening to hours of people presenting. And I was fascinated. I was like, someone knows this principle who was setting this thing up, because speaker after speaker after speaker got up there and started, and we're talking about the importance of ending violence against women and the statistics about violence against women and everything like that without ever blaming men. And I was like, wow. I mean, it was hours this went on. I was like, how did this happen? And one woman slipped up for like 2 seconds. She was like, rah, men, rah, and then got herself back under control. And I was like, these people got coached. Someone's coaching them who absolutely understands this. Because there are lots of men in the audience, right? I don't beat my wife. And so I don't really want to be the target of this. And if you make me the target, then I'll start to resist a message I would otherwise support. And so I was like, I want to know who that was. I never found out. Like, who was it who told them all, you have to speak it this way? You can't speak it this way, because if you speak it this way, then it's going to create resistance, right? As soon as you find a culprit and start blaming people, then you're going to start to hit resistance. But that's a key principle, and one of the principles we'll cover towards the end of the program about key messenger mistakes and how to avoid them.
All right.
And that may not be what you're doing. I'm just saying that based on what you said, that would be speculation on my part that might be what was going on.
Right. That makes so much sense. Thank you for that. Let's go to a question for Jan here, who wants to ask you, were there aspects of your message which surprised you? And if so, which ones, and what was surprising about them?
It's a good question. So my message has evolved, and that's something else we'll talk about later in the program, is how to stay up to date with your message. So the first version was, you have a purpose, and living your purpose will create a better life. And this is a message that led to the book True Purpose. And the thing I said earlier about now's the time to create heaven on earth, that's a much more recent version of the message. So, and there's stuff in between, like it's time to transform business. So what surprised me about the message? I guess one of the things that surprises me is how simple it is. Like, really, the core of the message is usually quite simple and straightforward. The other thing, back to what we were just talking about before, there's an interesting feature when you do what we're going to do in this program and you get the message very cleanly from your higher guidance. Like, rather than you coming up with it, you download it, right? You say, okay, what's my message? And you are delivered the message and you write it down. If that process goes well, and we can tell whether it did or not, then the message actually generates almost no resistance at all. It's kind of funny because you can deliver the message to people of different political beliefs or religious beliefs or lack thereof or gender or culture, whatever. It's kind of funny when the message comes from higher guidance, when it comes from a trusted source. My experience is you deliver the message and people just go, yeah. And everybody does that, right? Whether they were previously thinking that way or not. And I've tested this under the most extreme circumstances. This was a surprising feature of the message for me. Because like everyone else, I was terrified of being rejected for spreading my message. And what I noticed was when I delivered it well, it just didn't happen. And so I've gone to Israel and talked about the issues with the Israelis and the Palestinians. I was on stage with a bunch of Israeli politicians and journalists, and someone asked me about the Holocaust. And I'm like, oh my God, if ever there was like putting your head in a bear trap, this has got to be, I'm not even Jewish. Like, I mean, it's just the setup for the worst possible situation. And I just thought, well, Tim, you got to practice what you preach here and just give the message. And so I started saying kind of divinely guided true statements about the Holocaust, and as kindly as I could and as directly as I could. And I got no blowback whatsoever, which to me was a freaking miracle. Like, how could that even happen? That some goy, some Gentile from Berkeley could fly into Israel and start talking about the Holocaust and not have an explosion happen in the room. And I was saying controversial stuff too. I was just doing it in that really clean, guided kind of way. And I was told after they left, they said, this guy should be Israel's coach, was their comment. We need a coach, and I think it's him. I was talking about, dividing the world into friends and enemies, and how repeating the Holocaust and never again and stuff like that, the psychological effects that has on the culture to keep feeding themselves that message and all these it was I thought, very controversial stuff that stirred no controversy whatsoever. Anyway, there's my answer.
All right. Wow. Good for you. Well done.
Yeah. A counterphobic 6 on the Enneagram, for those of you who know the Enneagram.
I know a lot of the Shift audience is going, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, looking at the clock here, we do have time for a lot more questions. But before we take those, I want to go ahead and give a few details about the course itself. People are asking about that. Again, it's called Becoming the Messenger You're Meant to Be. And this is going to be a really powerful 9-week journey under Tim's expert guidance, where you'll apply 9 steps to reveal your exact message, word for word, that you have to share, and who's meant to hear it and how to deliver it. And the 9-week course takes place on Thursdays at noon Pacific, starting Thursday, July 11th. And if you can't join us live, that's fine. You won't miss the teachings. You'll receive audio and video recordings, transcripts, and all course handouts on your course homepage. Also, I'd like to remind everyone that the Shift Network offers a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks until July 25th in this case to make sure that you absolutely love it. And as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect in a private Facebook community group so you can stay connected with one another. Also, everyone who registers receives the Becoming the Messenger You're Meant to Be bonus collection. First, you'll receive 3 mastermind calls with trained True Purpose coaches. Then you'll get an audio program and ebook from Tim entitled True Purpose Meditations. You'll also be able to participate on a live call with Tim Kelley, the topic being working with parts. And in addition, you'll participate on a live coaching call with Jeffrey Van Dyke. And when you register by midnight Pacific on Tuesday, July 9th, you'll receive this extra gift, and that is an ebook from Tim, which he's been talking about. That's his book, True Purpose, 12 Strategies for Discovering the Difference You're Meant to Make. So before we get back into questions, Tim, why don't you share a little bit about what you're most looking forward to getting into in this specific course?
Yeah, so we've been helping people connect to their higher guidance and learn their purpose and live their purpose for 15 years now, something like that. And it's gone really well, and we've found thousands and thousands of people's purpose very, very effectively. And what I've noticed is, of the different aspects of purpose in our system, message is one of 4 different aspects of purpose, that the message sees little use. That people have so much fear about it and so much resistance about it that they don't really get the advantages of knowing their message. I use it to generate business all the time. And now that may not be your situation. You may not be looking for clients, but as a change agent, as someone who's meant to change the world, spreading your message is a very effective and very powerful way of doing that, and supports other strategies. So if you're not using your message, you're making it harder on yourself. The issue is that the message is one of the biggest ticket aspects of purpose, one of the things that generates the most fear and the most resistance. So many people who find their purpose can't even get their message at first and have to try several times before they can get their message. And when they do, they can't get enough permission to act on it. So we've only ever done a program like this once before, where we really focused on messengers. It was like a pilot, and there was only like 4 of them. And they did amazing stuff. One of them created a coaching school. One created a whole methodology and started leading workshops. One wrote a book. There was just all this stuff that happened out of this course with this very small group of people. One of them, there was a whole process about the higher purpose of disease that got launched by people in that group. It was really a lot of interesting stuff happened from that very small program. So I'm really excited, Lisa, to see what happens when we get 100 or 200 people really having permission to do this, and how much acceleration it creates for them, but also for all of us, right? If we want the world to change, people need to be out there spreading their message effectively, because that's how we win hearts and minds and we create the shift that we're trying to create. That's how we create heaven on earth. And so if a whole bunch of us aren't using our message at all, it's making it take too long. And that's like, this is my purpose in wanting to do this course, is this acceleration factor.
Okay, perfect. We've got a question here from Venice, going back to when we were talking about marketing and methods for spreading your message. She wants to know, can you talk a little bit about self-publishing in book form to get our messages out to the masses?
Yeah, sure. So it's an interesting question. Do I publish through a publisher or do I self-publish? And there's actually a more fundamental question: is a book the right medium for me to spread my message? More fundamental one. I really get help like that from Elizabeth Marshall, who helped me a lot when I was getting my book out there. You can look her up. Anyway, so here's some things I've learned. So one is that publishing with a publisher gives you more credibility than self-publishing. That's one. Two is, whether you self-publish or publish through a publisher, you are going to be your book's salesperson and advocate. People have this imagination that the book is somehow going to sell itself. Books do not get up and walk out and sell themselves. Like, you have to sell them. Publishers may help with that. They may try to put it in stores or shop it at events or stuff like that. But you have to be out there pushing and helping. So you get more help with that if you publish through a publisher than if you do it on your own. But you still have a lot of work to do marketing and selling your book, even if you go with a publisher. In the self-publishing realm, a lot, excuse me, I've known people who, hang on one second here. Got one of those sneezes that won't quite go, you know how that goes. Anyway, so in the self-publishing world, a lot of people get sidetracked because they get excited about it. They want to get their message out there. They buy a lot of books, and then they don't have a strategy for selling them, and they wind up with a bunch of books in their garage. I've seen it happen a bunch of times. So this is a very sad thing. A bunch of trees gave their lives, and your message isn't getting out there any more than it otherwise would have. So this is not a good thing. So that means that before you either publish or self-publish, you have to have a strategy in mind for how you're going to get those books out there. Like, how are you going to create buzz, create interest, have people want to buy your book, want to spend money on your book, want to read your book. And this is something else we'll talk about at the end of the program, is often people have an idea like, I have to tell my story, or I have to talk about the work I do with my clients. Neither of those is something the world is dying to buy, right? Now, if you're Hillary Clinton, right, there are a bunch of people dying to hear your story, but they don't care about you and they don't care about me. Let's be honest, right? Unless you're way more famous than I am. So writing your story probably isn't the right book. Often what that is someone who's not completely clear about their message, writing their story, hoping that someone else will be able to get the message from their story, which is way too much work to expect the reader to do. So those are some of the factors. The other key factor, a financial one, is if you self-publish, you get way more money per book than if you publish through a publisher, right? So I sell my book for $19.95. I think they cost me like $1.20 a piece or something like that, just in printing costs. And all of the other costs for indexing and editing and everything like that were all absorbed in the first printing of it. I'm like on my third or fourth printing of True Purpose. So if you're planning on selling them yourself, you'll make much more money if it's self-published than if it's published through a publisher. The publisher is going to sell books to you at a fairly minor discount, sometimes surprisingly small. So you're buying your book the same way a reader's buying your book. Your discount's not that great. But if you're paying a fraction of the cost of the book because it's self-published, then you can sell it to others and discount it, stuff like that. So I sell my book in bulks, right? So right now I'm working with a company on their higher purpose. They've got 500 people and they're asking me, can we buy the book? And sure, I'm selling it to them in boxes of 32, right? And, charging them like $10 a book, and 9 of that's profit. So anyway, those are some thoughts on publishing versus self-publishing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very helpful.
Oh, one last thing. The
Yes.
publishing takes a lot longer. Publishing, you're looking at like a 1.5 year delay or something like that. Anyway, continue.
Okay, great. I've got a question here from Patricia who wants to know, how can I be more motivated to achieve my purpose?
So if you're not feeling motivated to achieve your purpose might not be that accurate. In the sense that your purpose should be uniquely motivating to you. If it's not, either it's not the right purpose or you've got a bunch of fear and stuff in the way, right? Now, you may not know how to do it. You may not be motivated to take some of the steps. That's a different story. But for that, I would say getting the purpose super clear, which we will do in this. We'll give you an opportunity to do in this program. It's not the main point of the course. The main point of the course is about your message, but you can get your purpose too if you want. Getting your purpose clear and then clearing the fear out of the way. If you've done those two things and you're still not motivated, then we have a much more interesting problem. Usually it's one or both of those two contributing to the lack of motivation. The purpose isn't accurate or specific enough, and there's fear and resistance about doing it.
Okay, great. Once again, we come back to that fear. It's a pretty strong motivator,
Big topic
isn't it?
for messengers. Big topic.
Yeah.
That's why the course is 9 weeks long, right? Normally these courses are 7 for doing the stuff we're doing. And the reason it's 9 is both have more time dealing with fears and more time on practical matters of how to spread your message effectively.
Perfect. All right. Well, we've got a couple questions here about voice dialogue. And again, I'm going to butcher the name. I apologize. It's either Yanev or Yaniv. The question is,
Yaniv.
In voice dialogue, thank you. In voice dialogue, each voice has a different message, point of view. How can I know the difference between a message that comes from an inner voice than a message that comes from my true purpose?
So I'm not sure it's true that every voice has a message. Every voice has a perspective, and every voice has an agenda, and every voice has a strategy, right? And they often have fears and stuff like that. I don't know that every voice has a message. That's an interesting question I haven't really played with. The way you can tell whether the message is accurate or not, there's actually 9 tests that we use for getting purpose information really clearly sorted out. But one of the best tests of all, one of the simplest ones, is you just picture an audience in front of you and say it out loud to that audience, right? I mean, like physically out loud, the virtual audience, but you're actually speaking the words out of your mouth. So you close your eyes, you picture the thousands of faces looking up at you, and you say, it's time for humanity to evolve to the next level. We've been stuck for too long, or whatever your message is, right? And then notice what you feel in your body and in your emotions. And if it really is your message, one of 2 things will happen. One, you'll be absolutely elated and filled with joy and like all this buzz and energy going on, or you'll feel like vomiting. In fact, you may have trouble choking all the words out, right? If either of those 2 things happens or some combination, that's your message. If you get this sort of mediocre response, like, yeah, I can say that, that's no big deal, it's not your message. There are other tests, but that's a really simple one.
Okay. Well, while we're on the topic then of voice dialogue, Elizabeth wants to know, is the best way to approach this work through voice dialogue? Is active dialogue used in the process for finding your message? I know you've touched on this, but maybe we can drill down a little bit.
Yeah, so this program is not a training in parts work. So if people come in having no experience working with their internal parts at all, they're going to get, we'll have a bonus call about it, right? And they may get enough information to get themselves into trouble, but it's not going to be a major teaching from the front of the room. However, a lot of people who are taking this course have either done other processes with us, like voice dialogue or inner harmony or something like that, where they learned to work with parts and spent weeks or months working with their own parts, and possibly with clients' parts as well. Or they did internal family systems therapy or psychosynthesis or NLP parts work or something with somebody else. So they come in with parts work expertise. For those of you who have parts work expertise, the parts work stuff fits into the program in two ways. One is that there are actually really good strategies you can use to deal with parts as a way of clearing fears out of the way. But rather than saying, I have a fear, you say, one of my parts has a fear, and you go talk to the part about the fear. And then there's specific techniques you can use to deal with the fears the part is having. So that's one. So you can use it as a great way of clearing the fears out of the way. The other way is that you're going to, at some point in the program, wind up talking to something that knows what your message is, and it's going to explain it to you. This could be internal, like your higher self or your intuition or your gut or your heart or your soul. It could be external, like source or spirit or the universe or God or Allah or Buddha. It's up to you to pick what that thing is. We'll talk about that early in the program. But in order for this particular process to work, you're going to have two-way dialogue with it. And if you're trained in voice dialogue or trained in NLP parts work or something like that, whatever technique you learned to use to talk to parts, you can use that same technique to talk to this thing, which I call a trusted source. It's just a made-up term. So you're going to be having two-way dialogue with it. So whatever experience you have with parts will come in handy twice. Once to get permission, and a second time to have the dialogues you're going to have to learn about your message and learn who it's for and learn how to deliver and all that. It's going to be this trusted source explaining that stuff to you. And so those techniques that you've used can all be used to get those answers.
Okay, perfect. Wow. Well, I'm looking at the clock here, and we're just about out of time. This has been such a powerful conversation. I think we could go on forever. But I want to thank our viewers for being with us today and for all of your fantastic questions. Once again, Becoming the Messenger You're Meant to Be starts Thursday, July 11th. And again, you can visit becomingamessenger.com to learn more and to register. But before we cut you loose, Tim, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I want to point out how much of the time we spent talking about fear, because that's such an issue for messengers, right? Dealing with the fears of being a messenger and spreading your message and having it out there, fears of rejection, fears of being killed, all the fears. So that's a key part. That this is what stops messengers, and that's a key reason why we're holding this program, to help you work through those fears. And interestingly, some of the people who are going to be doing this program are ones who are new to the True Purpose process and what we're doing. Some of them will have done many other courses with us and have been through the True Purpose process many times. We have people taking this course who are coaches or even teachers from the True Purpose Institute who teach programs like this one, taking this program as a participant because they want to update their message and deal with their fears and get all this stuff out of the way so they can go out and spread their message the way it was meant to be spread and have the impact they're meant to have. So you may be new at this and you may be an old hand. Both are entirely appropriate. The reason why it's appropriate if you're an old hand is because there's so much fear and so much resistance that it's often difficult to deal with on your own outside of a structure like this one. So anyway, I hope this has been great for you. I hope that you're inspired and feeling renewed vigor and passion for being the messenger you're meant to be. And if you're totally clear on your message and there are no fears in the way, go get them. And if that's not the case, I hope you'll join us for this program to get this stuff cleared out of the way so you can do what you're here to do.
Right. Time to finally deal with that question. What are you afraid of? All right. Well, Well, once again, Tim, thank you so much. A very long list, but you've got 9 weeks to work on it. So wonderful.
That's right.
Again, thank you, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for doing a great job hosting.
All right. right. Well, once again, thank you to everyone who joined us. On behalf of all of us at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this course or perhaps another one in the future. Have a great day, everyone.